The rain hammered against the windows of our two-story colonial in the suburbs of Richmond, creating rivers that cascaded down the glass. I sat in my home office, the blueprints for the Morrison Plaza spread across my desk, but my eyes were fixed on the scene unfolding in the living room below. Through the half-open door, I could see everything, hear everything. My mother-in-law, Ethel Beach, stood near the fireplace, her silver hair pulled back in that severe bun she always wore, her face contorted in theatrical distress. My wife Patricia hovered beside her, one hand on her mother's shoulder, the other clutching what appeared to be an empty jewelry box. "It's gone, Patricia. All of it. The emerald necklace your father gave me on our 30th anniversary. The diamond bracelet. Even my grandmother's pearl earrings." Ethel's voice cracked with practiced precision. "I left them right here on the mantel yesterday, when I took my shower. I specifically remember because I was showing them to you." Patricia's face had gone pale, her hands trembling. "But Mom, no one else was in the house except Devin." Ethel spoke my 17-year-old son's name like a curse. "I saw him coming down the stairs around that time. He looked nervous, Patricia. Guilty. I watch my son descend those same stairs now, his brown hair damp from his evening shower, wearing his track team hoodie. Devin had his mother's gentle features, but my dark eyes, my build. At 17, he was already 6 feet tall, lean and strong from years of cross-country running. He froze halfway down when he saw their faces. "What's wrong?" His voice carried that slight uncertainty teenagers get when they walk into adult tension. Patricia turned to him, and I saw the war happening behind her eyes. She loved our son. I knew that. But Ethel had been working on her for months now, ever since moving in with us after her alleged financial troubles. Every small thing became evidence of Devin's supposed delinquency. AB plus instead of an it meant he was lazy. Coming home at 10:05 instead of 10 o'clock meant he was lying about where he'd been. Patricia, exhausted from her nursing shifts and worn down by her mother's constant presence, had begun to crack. "Devin," Patricia's voice was tight, controlled. "Grandma's jewelry is missing. The pieces she left on the mantel yesterday." I watched my son's face. Confusion, then understanding, then hurt. "I didn't take any jewelry. I haven't even been near the mantel. I've been at school and track practice. Don't lie to me." Ethel stepped forward, her eyes hard. "I know what I saw. You needed money, didn't you? For what? Drugs? That girl you've been sneaking around with." "What? I don't. There's no girl." "I haven't." Devin looked to his mother, pleading. "Mom, I swear I didn't take anything." Patricia's jaw tightened. I could see it happening, see her mother's poison finally taking full effect. "Devin, those pieces are worth over $40,000. This isn't a joke." "I know it's not a joke." Devin's voice rose, desperate now. "I'm telling you the truth." "Then where is it?" Ethel demanded, moving closer. "If you didn't take it, where could it possibly be?" "I don't know. Maybe you misplaced it. Maybe—" "Don't you dare blame me, you little thief." Ethel's mask slipped for just a moment, and I saw something cold and calculating beneath. Patricia raised her hand, silencing them both. When she spoke, her voice was ice. "Devin, I have worked myself to the bone for this family. Your father's architectural firm went through a rough patch 3 years ago, and I picked up extra shifts to keep us afloat. I have sacrificed everything for you. And this is how you repay me? By stealing from your own grandmother. Mom, please, get out of this house." The words exploded from Patricia like a gunshot. "I will not raise a thief. I will not have a criminal under my roof. Get out. Now." Devin stood frozen, tears streaming down his face. "Dad!" He looked up toward my office, and our eyes met through the doorway. In that moment, my son was begging me to intervene, to defend him, to stop this. I said nothing. It was the hardest thing I'd ever done, harder than watching my father die, harder than the year I nearly lost the firm, harder than anything I'd endured in my 42 years. But I said nothing. I held my son's gaze and gave him the slightest, almost imperceptible nod. "Trust me." Devin's face crumpled, but something changed in his eyes. Some understanding passed between us that 17 years of father and son had built. He turned without another word, grabbed his jacket from the coat rack, and walked out into the storm. The door slammed. Patricia collapsed into a chair, sobbing. Ethel stood by the mantel, and for just a moment, when she thought no one was looking, I saw her smile. I returned to my desk and the blueprints, but my mind was elsewhere. 3 months ago, I noticed things. Small things at first. The way Ethel watched Devin with something that wasn't quite grandmotherly concern. The way certain items in the house would go missing, then reappear in strange places, always near where Devin had been. The way she'd started sleeping in the guest room directly above his bedroom, as if monitoring his movements. Most people would have dismissed it as an overbearing grandmother. But I was an architect, trained to see patterns, to understand how structures functioned and where the weak points lay. And I'd begun to see the architecture of Ethel's manipulation, the careful engineering of her plan. So I'd started my own investigation. I'd installed tiny cameras in key locations throughout the house, in the living room, the kitchen, the hallway upstairs. Completely legal, in one's own home, with signage posted at the entrances that Patricia had stopped noticing months ago. I documented everything. Every time Ethel moved something of Devin's, every lie she told, every whispered comment to Patricia when she thought I couldn't hear. But the jewelry theft was the masterstroke I'd been waiting for. It was too bold, too perfect, too final. This was meant to be the killing blow, the one that would permanently poison Patricia against her own son and destroy our family from within. What Ethel didn't know was that 3 days ago, I'd made a copy of the spare key to her locked drawer in the guest room dresser. I'd seen her hide something there, something wrapped in velvet cloth. I hadn't looked yet, hadn't confirmed my suspicions, because I needed her to play her hand fully. I needed her to commit completely. And now she had. I waited 30 minutes, listening to Patricia's sobs gradually subside. Then I descended the stairs, my footsteps measured and calm. "Marcus, how could you just sit there?" Patricia looked up at me, her eyes red and swollen. "Your son just—" "I know exactly what happened," I said quietly. "I've known for a long time." Ethel's head snapped toward me, but her expression remained carefully neutral. "Marcus, I understand this is difficult, but Devin needs help. Professional help. Maybe some time away will. Save it, Ethel." My voice was calm, almost pleasant, which made the words hit harder. "I know what you did. I know all of it. What are you talking about?" Patricia stood confused. "Marcus, if you knew something. I installed security cameras throughout the house 3 months ago. The signs are posted at every entrance. You both consented simply by entering and remaining in the home." I pulled out my phone, opened an app. I've been watching, documenting, waiting. The color drained from Ethel's face. "Watching what?" Patricia demanded. "If you have proof Devin took the jewelry, then—" "I have proof," I said, "of who really took it." I held up my phone, showing them the camera feed from the living room, timestamp from yesterday evening. On the screen, clear as day, Ethel Beach carefully taking the jewelry box from the mantel, looking around to ensure she was alone, then carrying it upstairs. That's not what it looks like," Ethel stammered. "I was just moving it to a safer place. I was going to tell Patricia, but then I forgot, and then you accused my son of stealing it." I advanced slowly, my voice never rising. "You've been building to this for months, undermining him, planting doubts, moving his things, gaslighting both of us. But this was the final play, wasn't it? Turn Patricia against her own son completely. Destroy him. Break this family apart. Why would she do that?" Patricia whispered, but I could see the doubt creeping in, see her starting to remember things. "Because she never wanted you to marry me in the first place." I kept my eyes on Ethel. "Because 15 years ago, I learned something about your father's business, about where the money really came from, about Ethel's involvement in covering up his fraud. I never told you, Patricia, because your father was dying, and I thought it would only cause you pain. But Ethel knew that I knew, and she's been terrified for 15 years that I'd tell you the truth." "What truth?" Patricia looked between us. Ethel's face had gone from pale to flushed, her breathing rapid. "You're insane. Those cameras aren't even legal. Whatever you think you saw, the cameras are completely legal. One-party consent in Virginia, and I'm the party who consented. Plus the posted notices at every entrance." I smiled, cold and empty. "But you're right about one thing. I haven't shown you everything yet. I pulled out a small USB drive from my pocket. 3 days ago, I made a copy of the key to your locked drawer upstairs. I looked inside this morning. Want to tell Patricia what I found? Or should I? Silence. Heavy and suffocating. Marcus, what is going on? Patricia's voice cracked. Your mother hasn't just been hiding her jewelry to frame Devin. She's been stealing from us for months. Pieces of my grandmother's china. The gold cufflinks my father left me. Money from your nursing school fund for emergencies. It's all in that drawer upstairs, along with about $12,000 in cash she's been skimming from the household accounts. Patricia turned to her mother, her face a mask of disbelief. Mom, he's lying. He's trying to turn you against me, just like he turned you against your father's memory. Your father was a criminal, I said flatly. He defrauded investors out of millions. Ethel helped him hide the money. When he died, she suddenly had financial troubles because the money was gone, seized by the government. She moved in here not because she needed help, but because she was looking for her next mark, looking for a way to extract as much as she could before moving on. Stop it, Ethel screamed, her composure finally shattering. You self-righteous bastard. You think you're so perfect with your nice house and your successful firm and your perfect little family. You have no idea what it's like to lose everything, to be left with nothing while everyone judges you. So you decided to destroy my son? My voice dropped to something dangerous. To break him? To make him believe his own mother thought he was a thief. He's weak, just like his father, standing in that office, watching, doing nothing, saying nothing. She laughed bitterly. What kind of father lets his son be thrown out without a word? The kind who trusts his son enough to let him walk out that door knowing I had a plan. I checked my watch. Devin didn't go far. He's been sitting in my car in the garage this entire time, listening to everything through the baby monitor I asked him to carry. Patricia gasped. I walked to the garage door and opened it. Devin stood there, dry and calm, the baby monitor in his hand. He'd heard everything, seen everything through the camera feeds I'd share with my phone to his. Hey, Dad, he said quietly. Should I call the police now? Not yet, son. Let's give your grandmother a chance to leave on her own, after she returns everything she's stolen. Ethel looked trapped, cornered, her carefully constructed world collapsing around her. Patricia, you can't believe this. I'm your mother. I would never. You called my son weak. Patricia's voice was hollow, distant. You call my husband weak. You try to destroy my family. I gave you life. I raised you. You owe me. I owe you nothing. Patricia's words were final, absolute. Get out of my house. If you're not gone in 10 minutes, I'll call the police myself. Ethel stared at her daughter, at the family she'd tried so hard to destroy, and realized she'd lost. She turned and fled upstairs. I put my arm around Devin, held my son close. You did good, kid. I know that was hard. I trusted you, he said simply. I know. I'm sorry I put you through that. Patricia stood alone by the fireplace, her world shattered. She looked at us, at the husband and son she'd almost lost, and her face crumpled. I'm so sorry. Oh God, Devin, I'm so sorry. Devin hesitated, then went to her. They held each other, both crying, both damaged but not broken. I watched them and thought about the cameras still running upstairs, about the evidence still being collected. Because Ethel Beach didn't know it yet, but her nightmare was just beginning. This wasn't just about getting her out of our house. This was about making sure she never hurt another family again. The detective's name was Ray Delgado, a 20-year veteran with the Richmond Police Department's Fraud Division. He sat in our living room the next morning, reviewing the extensive documentation I'd prepared over the past 3 months. Every video clip, every transaction record, every piece of evidence meticulously organized and time-stamped. Mr. Cardenas, this is... He paused, searching for words. This is one of the most thorough civilian investigations I've ever seen. I'm an architect, I said. I'm trained to document everything, to see how all the pieces fit together. Well, you've certainly done that. He looked up from the tablet. But I have to ask, why did you wait? If you knew she was stealing from you 3 months ago, why not report it immediately? It was the question I'd been expecting, because I needed to understand the full scope of what she was doing. I needed to know if this was just about money, or if there was something deeper. I glanced at Patricia, who sat beside me, her hand in mine, and I needed to protect my family from whatever came next. Patricia had barely slept. The revelation about her father, about her mother, about how close she'd come to permanently damaging her relationship with Devin, it had all crashed down on her at once. But she'd held together, stronger than I'd expected. This morning, she'd been the one who insisted on calling the police. "I want her prosecuted," Patricia said, her voice firm despite the exhaustion. "For all of it. The theft, the fraud." She struggled with the word, the abuse. What she did to Devin, trying to frame him, that was abuse. Detective Delgado nodded slowly. "I understand. And based on what I'm seeing here, we definitely have ground for theft charges. The false accusation against your son is trickier. It's more of a civil matter, defamation and emotional distress. But combined with the theft and the pattern of behavior." He made a note on his pad. "The DA will be very interested in this." "There's more," I said. I handed him a separate folder, one I hadn't shown Patricia yet. I did some digging into Ethel's background after my father-in-law died. These are financial records, emails, documents from his business. I never wanted to use them, but now. Detective Delgado opened the folder, his eyebrows rising as he scanned the contents. "Holy hell, this is evidence of securities fraud, wire fraud, money laundering." He looked up at me. "Why didn't you report this 15 years ago?" "Because my father-in-law was dying of cancer, and I didn't want his last months to be spent in a courtroom. I thought his death would be enough, that Ethel would face natural consequences when the government seized the assets. I didn't know she'd hidden enough to avoid complete ruin. And you think she's been living off those hidden assets this whole time? Until they ran out, which is when she suddenly had financial troubles and moved in with us." Patricia's hand tightened on mine. I could feel her processing this, understanding that I'd carried this knowledge for 15 years to protect her. "Marcus, you should have told me." "I know. I'm sorry. I thought I was protecting you. I was wrong." Detective Delgado closed the folder. "I need to take all of this to the DA's office. With your permission, of course." "You have it," Patricia said immediately. "There's one more thing," I added. "Last night, after Ethel left, I checked her guest room thoroughly. She'd already taken most of her stolen goods with her, but she left this behind." I handed him a small notebook. It's a ledger. Names, amounts, dates. I think she's been running some kind of scheme for years, targeting other families. The detective flipped through the notebook, his expression darkening. "Mr. Cardenas, this could be part of a much larger investigation. If she's been systematically defrauding people, then more families need to be protected," I said. "That's why I'm giving you everything." As Detective Delgado gathered his materials and prepared to leave, Devin came downstairs. He'd slept in, missing school, and looked exhausted but calmer than last night. "Detective," Devin said quietly, "what's going to happen to her?" "To my grandmother." Delgado looked at the teenager with something like respect. "If everything here checks out, and I have no reason to think it won't, your grandmother's going to face multiple felony charges. She's looking at significant prison time." Devin nodded, processing this. "Good," he said finally. Then he looked at me. "Dad, I know you planned this. I know you could have stopped it before she accused me. Why did you let it get that far?" It was a fair question, one I'd known was coming. Patricia turned to me as well, waiting for the answer. "Because I needed her to go all in," I said honestly. "I needed her to show her true nature completely, to commit to the lies so thoroughly that there would be no room for doubt or manipulation later. If I'd intervened earlier, she would have found another angle, another way to hurt us. This way, she revealed everything. And it's on record." "But you gambled with our son," Patricia said softly. It wasn't quite an accusation, but almost. "No, I gambled that our son was strong enough to trust me for a few hours. And I was right." I looked at Devin. "I'm sorry for putting you through that. It was the hardest thing I've ever done. But I needed you to see who she really was, to understand that sometimes the people who should protect us are the ones we need protection from." Devin considered this for a long moment. "I get it," he said finally. "It sucked, but I get it. And honestly, it felt kind of badass sitting in that garage, listening to you take her apart." Despite everything, I smiled. "Language. Dad, I just got thrown out of my house and falsely accused of theft. I think I've earned one badass. Fair enough. After Detective Delgado left, the three of us sat in the living room, the morning sun streaming through the windows. The house felt different somehow, lighter, as if Ethel's presence had been a physical weight pressing down on us. What happens now? Patricia asked. Now we heal, I said. We go to family counseling. We work on rebuilding trust. We remember that we're a team and that no one gets to come between us. I should have believed you, Patricia said to Devin, tears streaming down her face. I should have trusted you. I'm so sorry. Devin moved to sit beside his mother, wrapping his arms around her. Mom, she was manipulating you for months. Dad showed me the videos last night, all of them. The things she said when you weren't looking, the way she moved my stuff around, the way she'd time her comments to hit you when you were most exhausted. She was playing a long game. She was playing chess while everyone else was playing checkers, I added. But she made one critical mistake. What's that? Patricia asked. She underestimated how much I love my family, and she underestimated my capacity for patience. I looked at both of them. I would wait forever if it meant protecting you both. Patricia leaned into me, and Devin rested his head on her shoulder. We sat like that for a long time, a family beginning to heal. But in the back of my mind, I was already thinking ahead. Ethel Beach was going to face legal consequences, yes. But there were other kinds of justice too. The ledger I'd given to Detective Delgado was real, but it was only part of what I'd found. There were other names in Ethel's records, other families she'd hurt over the years, and I was going to make sure every single one of them knew what she'd done. 3 days later, I sat in my office at Cardenas Architecture, reviewing the final designs for the Morrison Plaza, when my private investigator, Noel Mills, knocked on the door. I'd hired Noel 2 months ago, after it became clear that Ethel's schemes went deeper than just my family. Marcus, you're going to want to see this. Noel, a wiry man in his 50s with sharp eyes and a sharper mind, dropped a thick folder on my desk. I followed the leads from that ledger. The names, the amounts, the patterns. It's worse than we thought. I opened the folder and felt my blood run cold. Inside were detailed reports on 6 different families spanning the last decade. Each one followed the same pattern. Ethel would identify a vulnerable target, usually a recently widowed person or a family going through financial stress. She'd insert herself into their lives, gain their trust, then slowly drain them of money and valuables before disappearing. The Morrison family in Charlotte lost $80,000, Noel said, pointing to one report. She convinced the widow that she was helping invest the life insurance money. The Tate family in Raleigh. She moved in as a caregiver for the elderly father and systematically sold off his possessions while he was in the hospital. How is she not in prison already? I demanded. Because she's good. Really good. She always stays just under the threshold that would trigger major investigations. She uses cash transactions, fake names for some deals, and she moves locations frequently. And when people do get suspicious, she disappears before they can build a case. Until now. Until now, Noel confirmed. Because you gave Detective Delgado the roadmap. With the ledger and the documentation you provided, plus the evidence I've gathered, the police can connect all these cases. It's not just theft anymore, Marcus. It's a pattern of elder abuse, fraud, and systematic exploitation. I studied the files, my anger growing with each page. One name caught my eye, Stuart Wagoner. Why does that name sound familiar? Because he died 6 months ago. Suicide. His family found him in his garage, carbon monoxide poisoning. But look at the dates in the ledger. Ethel had been draining his accounts for 8 months before his death. He'd lost his wife to cancer, was grieving, and she took advantage of that. By the time he realized what was happening, he'd lost nearly everything. His kids found letters he'd written but never sent, talking about shame and betrayal. The room seemed to tilt. She drove him to suicide. We can't prove that directly, but the circumstantial evidence is strong. His daughter, Emma Wagoner, she's a lawyer in D.C. When I contacted her with information about Ethel, she was, well, let's just say she's very motivated to see justice done. I leaned back in my chair, processing this. What I thought was a personal vendetta against my family was actually the latest in a long series of calculated attacks. Ethel Beach wasn't just a bitter, greedy woman. She was a predator. "What do you need from me?" I asked. "The DA is building a case, but it's going to be complex. Multiple jurisdictions, multiple victims. They're talking about forming a task force. But here's the thing. Some of these families don't even know they were victims yet. Some of them think they made bad investments or lost things to regular theft. They need to be contacted, informed, brought into the investigation. And you wanted to help with that. You're credible. You're a victim who fought back. You have the documentation and the presence to make people listen. And honestly, Marcus, I think you need this. I think you need to see this through to the end." He was right. This wasn't just about protecting my family anymore. It was about stopping a predator and helping her other victims find justice. "Set up the meetings," I said. "I'll talk to whoever needs to hear this." Over the next 2 weeks, I became something I never expected to be, an advocate for fraud victims. With Noel's help, I reached out to the families Ethel had destroyed. Some were skeptical at first, unwilling to believe that the kind woman who'd helped them through difficult times had actually been robbing them blind. Others had suspected, but felt too ashamed or afraid to come forward. Emma Wagner was my first call. She met me at a coffee shop in D.C., a sharp woman in her mid-30s with her father's kind eyes and a lawyer's calculating gaze. "Mr. Cardenas," she said as she sat down, "I've been waiting for this call for 6 months. I knew something was wrong, knew my father wouldn't have killed himself without a reason. But I couldn't find the evidence, couldn't connect the dots." I slid her a copy of the ledger entries pertaining to her father. She read them slowly, her jaw tightening with each line. $73,000, she whispered, plus his mother's jewelry, his rare book collection, his war medals. All gone, all in 8 months. "I'm sorry. I know that doesn't help, but I'm sorry." She looked up at me, tears in her eyes, but fire in her voice. "Don't be sorry. Be ready, because I'm going to bury her. I'm going to make sure she never sees daylight again. I'm counting on it." Emma became my partner in the investigation, using her legal expertise to help coordinate between the various jurisdictions and victims. Together, we built an airtight case, not just against Ethel, but against the entire system that had allowed her to prey on vulnerable people for so long. At home, Patricia and Devin were adjusting to the new normal. Family therapy sessions twice a week had helped Patricia process her guilt and grief. She'd realized that her mother had been manipulating her for years, long before moving into our house. The signs had been there, the subtle criticisms, the way Ethel would create drama and then position herself as the problem solver, the way she'd isolated Patricia from other family members over time. "I feel like I've been in a cult," Patricia said one night as we lay in bed. "Like I'm deprogramming from years of manipulation." "In a way, you were," I said. "Ethel used classic cult tactics, isolating you, creating an us versus them mentality, making you dependent on her approval. It's not your fault. I almost lost our son because I believed her. But you didn't. He's down the hall, safe and healthy and doing remarkably well, all things considered." Devin was indeed doing well. After the initial trauma, he'd bounced back with the resilience of youth. His track coach, informed of the situation, had been supportive and understanding. His teammates rallied around him when rumors started circulating at school about what had happened. If anything, the experience had made him more confident, more certain of who he was and who he could trust. One Saturday afternoon, I found him in the garage, working on his college essays. He looked up when I entered, a slight smile on his face. "Writing about your traumatic experience for the admissions officers?" I asked. "Nah, I'm writing about the importance of trust and family. But I'm focusing on you, Dad, on how you taught me that sometimes the strongest thing you can do is wait and think instead of react. That's really something, son. You know what the weird thing is? I'm not even mad about what happened. I mean, I was at first, but now I just feel sorry for Grandma Ethel. How empty must your life be to spend it hurting people?" I sat down beside him. "That's a very mature perspective." "Yeah, well, therapy helps." He grinned. "But seriously, Dad, I've been thinking. What you did, the way you planned everything, the way you protected us, that wasn't just about revenge or justice. It was about making sure she couldn't hurt anyone else. That's pretty cool. I'm not sure cool is the word I'd use. Then what word would you use? I thought about it. Necessary. Sometimes doing the right thing means doing the hard thing. It means being willing to be misunderstood, to seem cold or calculating, because the alternative is allowing evil to continue unchecked. Devin nodded slowly. I want to be like that. When I'm older, when I have my own family, I want to be someone who protects people, who sees the patterns and stops the bad stuff before it destroys everything. You're already well on your way. The trial was set for early December, just over a month after the initial incident. The DA had moved quickly, recognizing that this was a high-profile case with clear evidence and multiple victims. Ethel had been arrested 2 weeks earlier when she tried to board a flight to Costa Rica using a fake passport. Apparently, she'd been planning her escape for months, setting up accounts and establishing a new identity. But we'd been faster. The courtroom was packed on the first day of the trial. All 6 victim families were present, along with Detective Delgado, Emma Wagoner, and a team of prosecutors. Patricia and I sat in the front row, with Devin between us. He'd insisted on being there, on seeing justice done. Ethel entered in an orange jumpsuit, her hair gray and unkempt, her face haggard. She'd aged years and weeks. When her eyes found us in the crowd, I saw a flash of pure hatred before she looked away. The prosecutor, a fierce woman named Kendra Adams, laid out the case methodically. Video evidence of Ethel hiding the jewelry. Financial records showing the systematic theft. Testimony from the other victim families. The ledger with its damning entries. Expert witnesses explaining patterns of elder abuse and financial exploitation. Ethel's defense attorney, a public defender who looked overwhelmed, tried to paint his client as a desperate widow, driven to extremes by poverty and grief. But every argument crumbled under the weight of evidence. This wasn't a one-time mistake or a crime of passion. This was calculated, systematic predation spanning a decade. On the third day of the trial, Emma Wagoner took the stand. She spoke clearly and powerfully about her father, about his kindness and his vulnerability after losing his wife. She described how Ethel had inserted herself into his life, gaining his trust and then destroying him financially and emotionally. My father was a proud man, Emma said, her voice steady despite the tears on her cheeks. He was ashamed that he'd been fooled, ashamed that he'd lost everything his wife had wanted to leave to their grandchildren. He wrote in his letters that he couldn't face us, couldn't admit what had happened, and so he took his own life. The defendant might not have put the poison in that garage, but she put the despair in his heart. She killed him as surely as if she'd pulled a trigger. The courtroom was silent. Even Ethel's attorney had no rebuttal to offer. When it came time for the defense to present their case, there wasn't much to present. Ethel herself took the stand, against her attorney's advice, and tried to paint herself as a victim of circumstances. She claimed she'd only taken the jewelry to keep it safe, that the other families had given her money willingly, that everything was a misunderstanding blown out of proportion. But Kendra Adams destroyed her on cross-examination. Mrs. Beach, you testified that you were only trying to keep the jewelry safe. Why then did you accuse your grandson of stealing it? I was confused. I forgot where I'd put it. You forgot? But you told your daughter you specifically remembered placing it on the mantel. You told her you saw Devin looking nervous and guilty. Were you lying then? Or are you lying now? Ethel's face flushed. I wasn't lying. I was mistaken. Mistaken. I see. And when you collected $80,000 from the Morrison family for investments, was that also a mistake? They gave me that money willingly. They trusted me. Exactly. They trusted you. Just like Stuart Wagoner trusted you when you convinced him to liquidate his retirement accounts. Just like the Tate family trusted you when you sold their father's belongings while he was hospitalized. You systematically identified vulnerable people, gained their trust, and then robbed them. That's not a mistake, Mrs. Beach. That's a pattern. That's a choice. By the time Kendra Adams was done, Ethel looked like a cornered animal. Her carefully constructed facade had completely crumbled, leaving only anger and desperation. The jury deliberated for less than 4 hours. When they returned, their verdict was unanimous on all counts. Guilty of theft, fraud, elder abuse, wire fraud, and conspiracy. The judge, a stern woman named Maxine Snyder, set sentencing for 2 weeks later. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed us. I gave a brief statement about protecting families and hoping this would prevent others from becoming victims. Emma Wagoner spoke eloquently about her father's memory and the importance of reporting elder abuse. Patricia and Devin said nothing, but their presence beside me spoke volumes. As we walked to our car, Devin said quietly, "It's not over yet, is it? The sentencing is in 2 weeks." "No, it's not over," I agreed. "But the hard part is done. She's been found guilty. Now she faces the consequences. Do you think she'll apologize? Show remorse?" I thought about Ethel's face in the courtroom, about the hatred in her eyes when she looked at us. "No, I don't think she's capable of that." "Then I hope they throw the book at her." Patricia took Devin's hand. "Whatever happens, we move forward as a family. We don't let her poison us anymore." The 2 weeks before sentencing were strange. We'd spent so long focused on the trial, on gathering evidence and preparing testimony, that the sudden absence of that mission left a vacuum. Life began to return to normal, or at least a new version of normal. I threw myself back into work, finishing the Morrison Plaza designs and beginning preliminary sketches for a new hospital wing. Patricia returned to her nursing shifts, though she'd requested a transfer to a different floor to reduce her hours and have more time for family. Devin continued his training for the spring track season, his times improving as the weight of the false accusation lifted from his shoulders. But we all knew we were waiting for December 15th, for the sentencing hearing that would determine how much of her life Ethel Beach would spend in prison. Emma Wagoner called me the week before the hearing. "Marcus, the prosecutor wants to know if you want to give a victim impact statement at the sentencing. You, Patricia, or Devin? Any or all of you. What would that entail?" "You'd speak directly to the judge about how Ethel's actions affected you and your family. It's a chance to make sure the court understands the full scope of the harm she caused." I thought about it. I'll talk to Patricia and Devin. See what they want. That night at dinner, I raised the question. Patricia immediately shook her head. I can't stand up there and talk about my mother like that, even after everything. I know she deserves it, but I can't." "That's okay," I assured her. "No one expects you to." "I'll do it," Devin said quietly. We both looked at him. "Son, you don't have to." "I want to." His voice was firm, certain. "She tried to destroy me. She tried to make me believe I was a thief, a criminal. She tried to turn Mom against me. I want to look her in the eye and tell her exactly what she did and how it failed." "That's a lot of pressure for a 17-year-old, Patricia said worriedly. "Mom, I can handle it. Dad trusted me to handle walking out into that rain. You can trust me to handle this." So it was decided. Devin would give the victim impact statement, and I would be there to support him if needed. In the meantime, Noel Mills continued his investigation into Ethel's background. What he found was both illuminating and deeply disturbing. Her real name isn't even Ethel Beach, Noel told me over lunch 3 days before the sentencing. She was born Eleanor Blackwood in rural Tennessee. Changed her name in her 20s, right after she married her first husband. First husband? Patricia's father wasn't her first, he was her third. The first two both died under suspicious circumstances. No charges were ever filed, but in both cases, the men had recently increased their life insurance policies and left everything to Eleanor. Or Ethel, as she was calling herself by then. I felt sick. Are you saying she killed him? I'm saying the circumstances were suspicious enough that a competent investigator should have looked deeper. But she was good at moving, at changing identities, at staying just under the radar. By the time she married Patricia's father, she'd refined her technique. She chose men who were successful but not too prominent, who had assets but weren't wealthy enough to have extensive security or legal teams. And when Patricia's father got cancer, she saw her opportunity. The insurance money, the business assets, everything. She helped him hide the fraudulent money, probably thinking she'd have access to it after his death. But the government seized most of it, leaving her with less than she'd expected. That's when she started targeting other families more aggressively. She's been doing this for decades. Since her 20s, She's 67 now. That's over 40 years of exploitation, manipulation, and possibly murder. I sat back, overwhelmed. Can we prove any of this? The earlier deaths? Not easily. The cases are old. The evidence is gone or degraded. But I've shared what I found with Detective Delgado. He's passing it on to cold case investigators in the relevant jurisdictions. Even if they can't prosecute, it establishes a pattern that supports the current charges. Does Emma know? I briefed her yesterday. She's including it in the information packet for the judge. The prosecutor is arguing for the maximum sentence on every count to be served consecutively, not concurrently. How long are we talking? If the judge goes along with the prosecution's recommendation, 30 to 40 years. Ethel would be over 100 before she'd be eligible for parole. She'll die in prison. Yes, she will. I thought about that. About a woman spending her final years locked away, paying for decades of cruelty and greed. I tried to feel sorry for her, to find some compassion. But when I thought about Stuart Wagoner killing himself in his garage, about Devin walking out into that rain, believing his mother thought he was a criminal, about all the other families she destroyed, I felt nothing but cold satisfaction. Good, I said finally. That's good. December 15th arrived gray and cold, with a biting wind that promised snow. The courtroom was less crowded than during the trial, but all the victim families were present. Emma Wagoner stood with her siblings, all of them prepared to speak about their father. The Morrison family widow sat with her adult children. Alan Coffey, whose elderly father had been one of Ethel's victims, gripped his wife's hand tightly. Patricia, Devin, and I sat in our usual spot. Devin wore a suit, his first real suit, purchased specifically for today. He looked older, more mature, more certain of himself. Judge Snyder entered, and we all rose. The proceedings began with the prosecutor outlining the charges and convictions, then explaining the recommended sentence. Kendra Adams was thorough and unflinching, detailing every crime, every victim, every dollar stolen. Then came the victim impact statements. Emma Wagoner spoke first, her voice strong and clear as she described her father's decline and death. She spoke of holidays without him, of grandchildren who would never know their grandfather, of a family forever scarred by Ethel's greed. Alan Coffey spoke about his father's confusion and fear when he realized his possessions were being sold, about the breakdown in trust between father and son when the elder man accused his family of not believing him. One by one, the family spoke. Each story was unique, but the pattern was identical. Trust exploited, vulnerability weaponized, lives destroyed. Finally, it was Devin's turn. He stood, walked to the podium, and adjusted the microphone. When he spoke, his voice was steady and mature beyond his years. Your Honor, my name is Devin Cardenas. I'm 17 years old, and I'm the grandson of the defendant. Or at least I thought I was. Now, I'm not sure what to call someone who tried to destroy my life for reasons I still don't fully understand. On the night of November 3rd, my grandmother accused me of stealing her jewelry. She lied to my mother, told her I looked nervous and guilty. And my mother, who had been worn down by months of manipulation and exhaustion, believed her. She told me to get out of her house. She said she wouldn't raise a thief. I walked out into the rain that night thinking my own mother believed I was a criminal. I was 17 years old, and I thought I'd lost everything that mattered. The only thing that kept me going was the look on my father's face, this tiny nod that told me to trust him, to hang on, to wait. I learned later that my father had been documenting my grandmother's behavior for months. He knew what she was doing. He knew she was lying. But he let it play out because he needed her to show her true nature. He needed the evidence to be absolute. I understand why he did that. I even respect it. But it doesn't change the fact that I spent 4 hours believing my mother thought I was a thief. 4 hours wondering if my family was destroyed. 4 hours sitting alone in a garage, listening to my father dismantle my grandmother's lies piece by piece. The thing is, I survived it. I'm here. I'm okay. I'm even stronger because of it. But not everyone, Your Honor. Stuart Wagoner didn't survive. Other families haven't recovered. My grandmother didn't just steal money and jewelry. She stole trust. She stole peace. She stole futures. I look at her now, and I don't feel hatred. I feel sadness. What kind of life do you have to live to become someone who hurts people for entertainment? Because that's what this was, Your Honor. It wasn't just about money. It was about the thrill of manipulation, the satisfaction of destroying families, the power of making people doubt themselves and each other. I hope you sentence her to the maximum allowed by law. Not because I want revenge, but because she needs to be stopped. She needs to be prevented from ever doing this again. And other people like her need to see that there are consequences for this kind of evil. Thank you. Devin returned to his seat. Patricia was crying silently, and I put my arm around her shoulders. I was proud of my son in that moment, proud in a way that went beyond words. Judge Snyder looked at Ethel, who sat hunched at the defense table, refusing to make eye contact with anyone. Mrs. Beach, or Ms. Blackwood, or whatever your real name is, do you have anything to say before I pronounce sentence? For a long moment, I thought Ethel would remain silent. But then she stood, slowly, and turned to face the courtroom. Her eyes found mine, held them, and I saw something ancient and bitter there. I regret nothing, she said, her voice surprisingly strong. You all think you're so perfect, so moral. But every single one of you would do the same thing if you were in my position. You take what you could get because that's what people do. We're all just trying to survive, and the strong prey on the weak. That's nature. That's reality. Marcus Cardenas thinks he's so clever, so righteous. But he's just like me. He manipulated his own son, used him as bait. He documented everything, waited for the perfect moment, played his games. We're the same, him and me. The only difference is that he won. Judge Snyder's expression could have frozen lava. Mrs. Beach, you were delusional. Mr. Cardenas protected his family. You destroyed families. There is no equivalence. Now sit down. Ethel smiled, cold and empty, and sat. I've presided over many difficult cases in my years on the bench, Judge Snyder said, but few have shown such sustained, calculated cruelty as this one. Mrs. Beach, you have spent decades identifying vulnerable people and systematically destroying them. You have stolen not just money and possessions, but dignity, trust, and in at least one case, life itself. The law provides certain maximum sentences for each crime you committed. The prosecution has asked that these sentences be served consecutively. I agree. For the theft charges related to the Cardenas family, I sentence you to 5 years. For the fraud charges related to the Morrison family, 10 years. For the elder abuse charges related to the Tate family, 15 years. And for the wire fraud and conspiracy charges related to Mr. Stuart Wagoner, the maximum of 20 years. These sentences are to be served consecutively for a total of 50 years in a federal penitentiary. At your age, Mrs. Beach, this is effectively a life sentence. I can only hope that you use whatever time you have left to reflect on the lives you've destroyed and the pain you've caused. But somehow I doubt you will. The gavel came down with a sound like a gunshot. Ethel was led away in handcuffs. She didn't look back. The weeks after the sentencing felt surreal, like waking from a long nightmare. The media coverage gradually faded. The other victim families began their own healing processes. Emma Wagoner started a foundation in her father's name to help elderly people protect themselves from financial exploitation. And we went back to being a family. Christmas came, and for the first time in years, it was peaceful. No tension, no manipulation, no walking on eggshells around Ethel's moods and schemes. Just Patricia, Devin, and me, along with a few close friends. On Christmas morning, Devin opened his gifts with the enthusiasm of someone who still remembered what it was like to be a kid, even though he was months away from college. Patricia had finally started sleeping through the night again, the worry lines around her eyes beginning to fade. I got into Stanford, Devin announced casually over breakfast. Patricia screamed and pulled him into a hug. I shook his hand and pulled him in two. Early decision? I asked. Yeah, found out yesterday, but wanted to wait until today to tell you. Why Stanford? Patricia asked, wiping tears from her eyes. Because it's far enough away to be independent, but close enough to come home when I need to. And because their architecture program is ranked second in the country. He looked at me. I want to be like Dad. I want to build things that matter and protect the people I love. I couldn't speak for a moment. You already do, I managed finally. Later that afternoon, I found Patricia in the kitchen, preparing dinner. She was humming something, a habit she'd lost during Ethel's stay and only recently recovered. You okay? I asked, wrapping my arms around her from behind. I'm better than okay. I'm finally starting to feel like myself again. She turned in my arms to face me. Marcus, I know I've said this before, but I need to say it again. Thank you for protecting us, for seeing what I couldn't see, for being patient with me when I was... She struggled for words. Under attack, I supplied. You were under attack from someone who knew exactly how to hurt you. I should have been stronger. You were exactly as strong as you needed to be. You survived. We all did. That's what matters. She kissed me, and for a moment, we were just Marcus and Patricia again, not victim and rescuer, not husband and manipulated wife, just two people who loved each other and were figuring out how to move forward. That evening, as we sat around the fireplace watching old Christmas movies, my phone buzzed. A text from Emma Wagoner. Foundation paperwork approved. First scholarship awarded in your son's name for students who've overcome adversity. Thank you for everything. I showed it to Devin. He read it, smiled, and then went back to the movie without comment. But I saw the slight nod, the quiet acknowledgement of something well done. We'd won, not just in the courtroom, not just by seeing Ethel in prison, but by refusing to let her destroy what mattered most. We'd remained a family. We'd protected each other. We'd survived. 6 months later, I stood in my office at Cardenas Architecture, looking at the completed Morrison Plaza. The building rose gleaming into the spring sky, all glass and steel and careful angles. It was one of my best designs created during some of my darkest days. Noel Mills had called that morning with an update. 3 of the cold cases involving Ethel's former husbands had been reopened. New evidence, new techniques, new possibilities for justice. It might take years, but the wheels were turning. Detective Delgado had also called, informing me that 2 more families had come forward with evidence of Ethel's fraud. Even from prison, her past crimes were catching up with her. There was talk of additional charges, additional sentences. But I was done with Ethel Beach. I'd given my testimony, provided my evidence, and watched justice being served. Now I was focused on the future. Patricia had been promoted at the hospital, taking on a leadership role in the nursing education program. She was thriving, confident, more herself than I'd seen her in years. The guilt she'd carried had gradually transformed into determination. Determination to help other families recognize manipulation and abuse before it was too late. And Devin was preparing for Stanford, his room slowly emptying as he packed for college. He'd grown 3 inches in the past year, filled out across the shoulders, and carried himself with a quiet confidence that came from knowing exactly who he was and what he was capable of. One Saturday in late spring, we had a family dinner, just the 3 of us, as had become our tradition. Afterward, Devin asked if we could talk in my office. "What's on your mind?" I asked, settling into my desk chair while he took the seat across from me. "I've been thinking about what happened last year. About Grandma Ethel, about the trial, about everything." He paused, collecting his thoughts. "I know you did what you had to do. I know you protected us. But I need to ask, do you have any regrets? About how you handled it?" It was a fair question, one I'd asked myself many times. "I regret that you had to go through that pain, even for a few hours. I regret that your mother had to face the truth about her own mother in such a brutal way. I regret that I didn't see what Ethel was doing sooner, before she hurt other families." "But you don't regret the plan itself?" "No, because the alternative was worse. If I confronted her earlier, she would have found another angle. She would have painted me as the villain, turned Patricia against me, and continued hurting people. By waiting, by documenting everything, by letting her reveal her true nature completely, we stopped her. We saved future victims. We got justice for past ones." Devin nodded slowly. "That's what I thought. And that's what I've been telling people when they ask about it at school. Because some of them think you were cold, that you should have stepped in immediately." "What do you tell them?" "I tell them that sometimes love means making hard choices. Sometimes protecting someone means letting them walk through fire for a little while, because you know they're strong enough to survive it and that the alternative is worse. I smiled. That's very wise. I learned from the best. He stood to leave, then paused at the door. Dad, I'm proud to be your son. I'm proud of what you did, how you handled it, how you protected Mom and me. And I'm going to spend the rest of my life trying to be half the man you are. After he left, I sat alone in my office for a long time, looking out at the city. The sun was setting, painting the buildings in shades of orange and gold. Somewhere out there, Ethel Beach sat in a federal prison, her schemes and manipulations finally at an end. Somewhere else, families were healing from her attacks, rebuilding their lives. And here, in this house, in this city, my family was whole. Damaged, yes. Changed, certainly. But whole. Strong. Together. I told Devin that sometimes love means making hard choices. What I hadn't said was that those choices leave scars, that I still woke up, sometimes remembering the look on his face when Patricia told him to leave, that I still questioned whether I'd done the right thing. But then I'd remember the alternative. I'd remember Stuart Waggoner in his garage, driven to despair by Ethel's cruelty. I'd remember the other families destroyed because no one had stopped her in time. I'd remember how close we'd come to becoming just another entry in her ledger of victims. And I'd know, with absolute certainty, that I'd made the right choice. The hard choice. The necessary choice. The choice that had saved my family and stopped a predator. My phone buzzed one final time that evening. A text from Patricia, dinner's ready. Come down before it gets cold. We love you. I smiled, saved my work, and headed downstairs to my family. Tomorrow, there would be new challenges, new projects, new problems to solve. But tonight, we were together. We were safe. We were home. And that was enough. That was everything. And there you have it. Another story comes to an end. What did you think? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoy this story, consider joining our community by subscribing. It means the world to us. For more stories like this one, check out the recommended videos on screen. And I'll see you there.